But again, watching these movies in order, I would like to have some continuity. There was a point in the movie, again, getting back to the things that stuck out, where I remember thinking to myself, this movie is how Suicide Squad should have been. I really liked the way that they gathered all these characters together. I liked the fact these were real characters. I'll repeat what many people have said. You know that we're in for something different the moment that Cassian Andor on, I believe it was Kobani, on that mining planet, shoots his informant. And you can see there's a conflict in him. You knew instantly, oh, we're getting a very, very different Star Wars movie now. And I liked that. It really harkened back to me to the original trilogy. And what I mean by that is I was thinking, you know, my 10-year-old and my 14-year-old in that scene with Cassian Andor probably had the same kind of reaction to Han Solo originally when he shot Greedo first, because he shot Greedo first. I remember that. It stuck out to me as a kid, and I went, whoa, he killed him before Greedo got a shot off. And it was a very interesting dynamic, and it really raised the stakes of the film. You know, and of course the fact that Disney was brave enough to go and kill everybody off. The movie moves quickly, doesn't move as fast as, say, The Force Awakens, but for being an almost 2 hour and 20-minute movie, once you get into that third act, it really takes off. But there was a moment where it did feel a little slow. From Jin's escape from the Clone Wars turbo tank, when she's slammed to the ground by K2SO, who was a highlight of the film, up until the explosion of Jeddah City, the destruction of Jeddah City, it did slow down a bit for me. We do have that action sequence that takes place on the streets of Jeddah, and that's a good sequence, don't get me wrong, but there is a bit of a pacing issue. I think part of the reason why, personally, I have an issue with the pacing at that moment and how it may improve later on, because I felt it more the first time than I did the second time. I think it's partly due to the fact that we don't know these characters yet. And as Star Wars fans, you know, we're going to fill in the backstory on these guys through ancillary material and get to know them a little bit better. Certainly we are with Saw Gerrera. We found out yesterday that he is going to be appearing on Star Wars Rebels very soon, or actually in the next season. So, not really knowing these characters very well, it's a lot different than, say, meeting characters like Finn and Rey, who we're going to be going on this journey with, you know, sort of surrounded by other characters that we do know. You know, these characters are brand new to this universe, and we're just not quite used to them yet. And then again, on second viewing, those moments were great. Those moments with Saw Gerrera and the hologram, and they were really good. But the pacing was just a little bit slow in some parts. The Mustafar scene, and this falls in the category of things that I like, but again, stuff that sticks out. The Mustafar scene with Vader and Krennic. Now, one, I wish they would have used a title card like they did for the other planets for Mustafar. I don't know why they didn't, and I haven't been able to find out yet why they didn't. But it was Mustafar. It says it in the art book, which I have, where Vader's castle is. But they didn't, and again, I do wonder what the rationale was for not putting Mustafar up there. I mean, there has to be a reason, right? So just as a quick negative on it, I wish there was a title card there. Because as a fan, I looked away for a brief moment when we went to the planet, because I looked at my son, because I went, oh my gosh, I think that's Mustafar. And then I looked back at the screen, and I had to lean over and ask, but did they put a title card up? And he said no. That Mustafar scene was the stuff of dreams for me. Might be one of my favorite scenes ever in Star Wars. And to me, it's a really, really good example of having Star Wars in the hands of individuals who are taking what's there and putting it up on screen, being brave enough to put it up on screen, making the decision to put it up on screen, and something that George Lucas wouldn't do. And what I mean by that is this movie does a better job of connecting the tissues of the films than George Lucas did. And it really lends itself back to this idea that George Lucas was a better songwriter than he was a singer. You know, I love his movies, don't get me wrong, but it seems like George held back. And I know he held back for particular reasons that he had, but what I like about what they're doing with the movies now, and The Force Awakens is included in that, is that they're going to these places. And so going to Mustafar and having the castle, that's something that I've wanted to see ever since I saw the artwork that lent itself to that when I was a kid. There was a particular piece of Ralph McQuarrie art where there was always a castle in mind for Vader. It's in the art books that was never realized. And when we got to Revenge of the Sith and Mustafar and the battle with Obi-Wan and Anakin, I wanted something, at least personally, and at least in my mind's eye because of the Ralph McQuarrie art, wanted something more Lord of the Rings-esque in terms of building design than what we got in terms of industrial design. It was fine. That's a great sequence in Revenge of the Sith. But you wanted something darker as it relates to Darth Vader. And we've never really been given the opportunity to equate Darth Vader in this darker place apart from when we see him on Star Destroyers and confronting Luke or on the Death Star. You don't really get a chance to see what is Darth doing when he's not off in space working for the Empire. And now we have something that we've only seen in the art books. We have this Vader castle, and we find out that he just basically sits in a Bacta tank overlooking the lava flows where he became Vader at the hands of Obi-Wan. I mean, that's dark stuff, but man, does it provide a level of depth to Vader that we've kind of always assumed was there but never had a chance to see. And I'll talk about this with Drew, but to me, it actually enhances what happens in Revenge of the Sith. Because for as much as people want to complain about Anakin's acting, Hayden Christensen's acting, and the whininess of him, right? You know, my new empire, your new empire, right? Don't make me destroy you. Well, I was actually too deep to be what Anakin said. But, okay, for that, right? And this is, and again, me personally, my podcast. To me, that fits the Vader without the armor, limbs cut off, hanging in a Bacta tank, just wallowing in his own darkness, right? Because that's to me is what Anakin would do, right? He fights Obi-Wan, he loses Obi-Wan, he's turned himself into a Sith, he murdered a bunch of children, he essentially killed his wife and at the time, thinks his unborn children, and so he just loathes himself. He's not going to be out, chilling, watching pod racing on a big screen. No, he's going to be sitting in a dark, foreboding tower. I mean, as it relates to the Star Wars universe, yeah, man, that's where he would be, in a bad mood, right? Just reveling in all of his darkness. And I was just shocked that they went there. I mean, this movie was brave to do that on a number of levels. This was look, and when you hear Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, say this was a big experiment, it was a big experiment, and it paid off. I mean, showing that Vader scene at the end, which we'll get to in the hallway, I mean, that's a bit of a gamble there. Is that going to work? I mean, to me, that's as big of a gamble as what they did in Attack of the Clones with Yoda battling Dooku, right? It's easier to pull off than that, but it still is a gamble. And the fact that this movie is relentless. Those last 3 minutes of the film don't give you a time to breathe, and they cut right to the end credits after killing off everybody. I mean, fantastic. I couldn't tell you the last time I walked out of a movie that flabbergasted, just like, oh, at how great that was. Now, getting back to Vader's castle just real quick. My favorite moment in Attack of the Clones comes right towards the end when Dooku returns to Mustafar and he's in his Geonosian ship. Cool design, by the way. And he goes to the outskirts of Coruscant, and there's sort of this deep pinkish purple hue over the planet, very dark, and the ominous music is playing, and he lands in this rundown industrial sector of Coruscant, and Palpatine is waiting for him there, and again, the ominous music playing in the background. That's one of my favorite moments because it reminded me of, again, that artwork, that dark part of Star Wars that I've wanted to see. This was, to me, very reminiscent of that, but giving me actually what I wanted. Right? That was sort of a facsimile of what I wanted. The Mustafar scene with Vader gave me what I wanted. Just absolutely fantastic. Now, we'll get to the things I didn't like and did like, but again, the things that stuck out, the last third of the film. And what I love about the last part of this movie is, to me, next to The Force Awakens, which did this kind of, but having these multiple events taking place, this Rogue One in the battle above the Shield Gate, the battle on the ground on Scarif, and then Cassian, K2SO, and Jyn trying to get the Death Star plans from the databank. To me, next to The Force Awakens, was the best 3 different events going on combination of any of the Star Wars movies. In The Phantom Menace, when they did it, trying to get in into Theed, right, on Naboo, trying to break in, the ground battle going on, and the space battle. I mean, and the palace part of it also includes the lightsaber fight with Obi-Wan, Darth Maul, and Qui-Gon Jinn. Those are good, but the ground battle in Phantom Menace takes me out of it. When we get into Jar Jar's big adventure, when he's jumping from tank to tank and all, that's probably the part of Star Wars that, if I don't mind Jar Jar that much in the film, that moment takes me completely out. That could have been a great, fantastic finish, but that just got too silly for me. And even in Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks, for me, and that forest setting always felt lacking. Love the film, don't misunderstand, but if we're critiquing, never really bought the Ewoks and their ferociousness. And, taking down stormtroopers with sticks and rocks, it just didn't. The rest of it was great. Rogue One, all 3 of those events going on were just top notch. Absolutely top notch. And all 3 of them I love. And I love the fact that it doesn't. Well, let me get into this. One more thing. And then, of course, the ending, right? I had no problem with CGI Tarkin. I think it was brave what they did, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with Drew, or CGI Princess Leia. But the fact that they ran this movie right up to the beginning of New Hope, didn't let go, closed on the Tantive 4 going into hyperspace off in the distance. I mean, just absolutely spectacular. And you watch that end sequence, they really did do a good job. And for what I've heard, it was intentional. When you get towards the end of the film, they set those shots up right there at the end to have more of a New Hope vibe. And they absolutely nailed it. It was funny. I was watching A New Hope. And again, being too critical on first view of Rogue One, I remember thinking to myself, wow, we're jumping around a lot. There's a lot of quick cuts that are going on here, right? We're kind of, I can't decide if this is jarring or not. Man, watching A New Hope, I didn't realize how much we jumped around in that movie. I mean, there's some moments there before they leave Tatooine with Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker, and they're dealing with with Uncle Owen and Peru and getting to Mos Eisley. And then we cut to the Death Star, and it's a really quick scene of the interrogation scene with Princess Leia. That's all of, 45 seconds, a minute? And then we cut back. I was thinking, man, I don't know why I'm complaining about being jarring. These movies have always done that, right? All right, so let me get to what I didn't like. Then I'll get to more specifics of what I did like, and then you'll hear my conversation with Drew. So the one thing that I didn't like, I didn't care for the creature, and I don't have the name. If I had the art book in front of me, I didn't care for the creature in Saw's homestead, or his compound. The creature that ends up trying to grab information from Bodhi Rook. I don't know. It felt like what they wanted to have a creature. They wanted to have something different, but I felt like there wasn't a big payoff there. It's like he still didn't believe Jyn when she showed up, and they were still wanting information. And so if he saw the hologram and got the info with this creature that screwed up Bodhi Rook's brain, why is there still any question involved? Looking at the art book,